Welcome to our channel, where we bring the most bone-chilling stories from the depths of Reddit's darkest corners. Join us as we explore the eerie tales that keep you up at night. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to never miss a spine-tingling story.
It had been a long time since I'd been home. More than a decade, in fact. Pine Hollow, with its cobblestone streets, family-owned shops, and large swathes of dense green forest, used to be my entire world. But life has a funny way of shrinking vast landscapes into the size of memories, of converting sprawling woods into mere mental images. The city offered new opportunities, or so I'd thought. The chaos, the endless buzz. It was a stark contrast to the sleepy mornings and serene nights of Pine Hollow. When the city's dense fog of stress and constant noise became unbearable, my thoughts turned toward home. The decision to return to Pine Hollow wasn't meticulously planned. It was a desperate yearning for solace, a refuge from the whirlwind life had become. I pulled into town just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over everything it touched. As my tyres rolled over the familiar terrain, I was struck by a palpable sense of change. The town sign, once a bright and welcoming blue, was faded and peeling. The streets were less vibrant than I remembered, with fewer children playing in yards and fewer people walking their dogs. The main street, once bustling with locals chatting and shopping, was quieter now. The people I passed looked different. It wasn't their faces or their clothes, it was their energy. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath. The trees, those towering pines that the town was named for, seemed to close in a little tighter than I remembered. As a child, they were guardians, their lofty branches a symbol of nature's protective embrace. Now they felt imposing, their shadows stretching ominously across the road. An inexplicable chill ran down my spine, stark against the warm, setting sun. My childhood home was at the end of Larkspur Lane. It was an old, Victorian-style house with a turret on one side and a large porch that wrapped around the front. It stood just as I remembered, yet different in subtle ways that were hard to place. It was older, of course. The paint was peeling in places, and ivy had begun to climb up one side. But it was more than that. The house seemed tired, like it had given up on waiting for our return and resigned itself to solitude. When I unlocked the front door, the smell of the house hit me. That old, musty scent that houses get when they've been closed up for too long. But underneath that, there was the faintest trace of something else, something sweet and dark that I couldn't quite place. As I wandered through the rooms, memories flooded back. The sound of my mother's humming in the kitchen, the soft creak of the floorboards outside my bedroom that would betray my father's attempts to sneak in and surprise us. There was comfort in those memories, but also a deep, resounding sadness, a mourning for a time that was never going to return. In my old bedroom, the walls were still adorned with the faded wallpaper I chose when I was 10. I went to the window and looked out, and for a moment I was a child again, peering into the woods, imagining the adventures waiting among the trees. But this time, as I looked out, I saw something, or perhaps someone, moving in the shadows of the forest. A figure, dark and indistinct, flitting between the trees. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving me with a racing heart and a deep sense of unease that settled in my stomach. In that moment, I realized that Pine Hollow, my refuge, my sanctuary, was holding secrets in its shadows, secrets that seemed to be surfacing, slowly but surely, now that I had returned. The first night back was restless. Every little sound, from the tapping of branches against the window to the distant howl of a wolf, kept me on edge. The bed felt unfamiliar, its springs poking uncomfortably against my back, reminding me of the years I'd spent away. Morning dawned with a muted greyness, filtering through the dense tree canopy. Pine Hollow was known for its cool, foggy mornings, but today's fog was thicker, almost suffocating. It seemed to carry a weight, an intensity that made the air dense and my lungs feel heavy. After breakfast, I decided to unpack and make the place a bit homier. The attic was filled with boxes from my childhood, old toys, books and diaries. I was engrossed in a trip down memory lane when a particular box caught my eye. It was older, its edges worn and the label faded. Curious, I pulled it closer. Inside, among old photographs and keepsakes, lay a diary that didn't belong to me. The name, Lilith Grey, was delicately inscribed on the cover in golden lettering. The diary itself looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age, and the leather binding cracked. Opening it, I found myself drawn into Lilith's world. The diary began innocently enough, filled with the musings of a young woman, accounts of local dances and troubles with suitors. But as the entries progressed, a subtle shift occurred. Lilith wrote of dreams, dark and vivid, where she was called into the forest by a chorus of hushed voices. Over time, her dreams seemed to merge with reality. The woods, she wrote, whispered secrets to her, both during the day and night. April 23rd, one entry began. The shadows grow more persistent. They dance and flicker, not just in the darkness of night, but even in daylight. They beckon me to join them in their dance, but their intentions feel malevolent. I hear them whispering, always whispering. The further I read, the more Lilith's sanity seemed to fray. She spoke of an old legend, a tale passed down through generations in Pine Hollow. It told of ancient spirits that resided within the trees, guardians of the forest. But over time, something had corrupted them, turning them into malevolent entities. The shadows she mentioned weren't just the absence of light. They were alive, sentient, and they sought to merge the world of the living with their own dark realm. The last entry was especially chilling. May 7th. I can't escape them. The shadows. They're not just in the forest now. They're here, in my room. I hear their whispers even as I write. They promise power and eternal life, but at a cost I dare not pay. I fear this might be my last entry. If someone reads this, heed my warning. The woods are alive, and they are hungry. Closing the diary, a deep unease settled in me. The figure I'd seen the previous night in the woods flashed in my mind. Was there a connection between Lilith's accounts and what I had witnessed? My contemplation was broken by a noise from outside, a faint whispering, just like Lilith described. Drawing the curtain aside, I looked out. The fog had thickened, but in the distance, at the edge of the forest, I could see them. Figures, shadowy and indistinct, watching the house. The sight of the shadowy figures paralysed me with a mix of fear and fascination. It felt like an eternity before I managed to wrench my gaze away, the whispering sounds echoing in my ears. Determined to uncover the mystery, I decided to head into town, seeking knowledge from the locals. Surely someone would know of Lilith Grey, or the legend she had written about. Pine Hollow's town centre was as I remembered, but more subdued. The once lively market square was mostly vacant, save for a few old stalls selling handmade crafts. The townspeople I encountered seemed distant, their greetings curt, eyes avoiding direct contact. Every conversation I tried to initiate about Lilith or the forest was met with evasive answers or a sudden change of topic. Feeling frustrated and more isolated than ever, I wandered into the town's library, a grand stone building that had served generations of Pine Hollow residents. Rows upon rows of ancient books and manuscripts awaited, and I hoped that somewhere among them lay the answers I sought. Mrs. Haverford, the librarian I remembered from my childhood, was still there. Time had etched more lines onto her face, but her eyes sparkled with the same sharp intelligence. Surprisingly, she recognised me immediately. "Ah, the prodigal returns," she remarked, her voice warm but with a note of caution. "What brings you back?" Seeking allies, I decided to be upfront. I told her about finding Lilith's diary, about the shadows and the figures I'd seen in the forest. To my surprise, her demeanour shifted from casual curiosity to deep concern. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I was afraid this day would come." She went on to explain that Pine Hollow wasn't just a simple town bordered by woods. The forest was the heart of Pine Hollow, and the town's prosperity was directly linked to it. The legend Lilith mentioned in her diary was not just a legend, it was the town's history. Long ago, the founders of Pine Hollow, seeking protection and prosperity, had entered into a pact with the forest spirits. In return for the town's safety and growth, a ceremonial tribute would be offered every 50 years. But something had gone awry during the last ceremony. Lilith Grey, destined to play a key role, had vanished, leading to the town's slow decay. "You've returned at a crucial time," Mrs. Haverford continued. The next ceremony is this year, and your return, it might be linked. You see, Lilith was your ancestor. The spirits might believe you can complete the circle she disrupted. Feeling a mix of dread and determination, I realized I was ensnared in something much bigger than I had imagined. I had to find a way to end this cycle, not just for me, but for the future of Pine Hollow. Mrs. Haverford handed me an ancient-looking tome. "This might help you," she said. "It contains rituals and counter-ceremonies, but be careful. Confronting the forest spirits will be dangerous." As I left the library, night was beginning to fall. The town's lights seemed dimmer and the shadows grew longer. Somewhere in the distance, the forest whispered, and I knew I had to prepare for what was to come. With the ancient tome clutched tightly in my hand, I hurried back to my childhood home. The once familiar path seemed more foreboding with the dying light, and every rustling leaf sent shivers down my spine. Once inside, I spread the contents of the tome on the living room floor. The pages, yellowed and fragile, contained a mix of handwritten notes and sketches depicting various symbols and rites. I needed to find a ritual that would break the bond between the town and the malevolent forest spirits. Hours passed as I scoured the book, the tales of old blending into a dizzying maze of myth and lore. Finally, a particular ritual caught my attention. The rite of the waning moon. It claimed to sever any unnatural bonds, freeing the living from the grasp of the dark. The ingredients were surprisingly simple: a silver bowl filled with spring water, a handful of herbs native to Pine Hollow, a white candle, and a personal item from the one who wishes to break the bond. Given Lilith's connection to all this, I decided to use her diary as the personal item. The ritual had to be performed in the heart of the forest, at the stroke of midnight, under a waning moon. That gave me just 3 days to prepare. The next few days became a whirlwind of activity. I visited old herbalists in town for the specific herbs, gathered spring water from a nearby brook, and managed to find a silver bowl in the attic, possibly a relic from one of our ancestors. Nightfall on the 3rd day found me at the forest's edge, armed with the necessary items. The woods seemed more alive than ever, shadows moving just beyond the reach of my flashlight, the whispering more insistent. I felt like an intruder, watched by countless unseen eyes. After what felt like hours, I reached a clearing. The canopy opened above to reveal the night sky, the moon hanging low and pale. The place seemed almost sacred, and I could feel the energy swirling around, both inviting and repelling. Carefully following the tome's instructions, I set up the ritual. The silver bowl was placed in the centre, with the herbs floating on the spring water's surface. On its right, I placed Lilith's diary, open to her last entry. To the left, I positioned the white candle, its flame flickering as if uncertain. As the clock neared midnight, the whispering crescendoed to a roar, the shadows converging on the clearing. My heart raced, but I knew I had to complete the rite. Reciting the incantation, I poured the water in a circle, trapping the shadows outside its boundary. The candle flame grew brighter, casting an ethereal glow over the clearing, and as the final words left my lips, the shadows recoiled with a shriek. Suddenly, everything was silent. The weight in the air lifted, and the forest felt neutral, cleansed of its malevolent force. However, the victory was not without its price. The energy expended had left me drained, and as I stumbled out of the woods, the first rays of dawn breaking the horizon, I felt an age's weight on my shoulders. Pine Hollow slowly began to regain its lost vibrancy. The townspeople, though initially reluctant, started to venture into the forest without fear. As for me, I had played my part, and it was time to move on. But I left with a newfound respect for the legends of old and the shadows that lurk in places we least expect.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe, as it means a lot, and hit the bell if you want to stay up to date with the latest scary stories. Don't forget to comment with any stories that you would like for me to do, and I will see you in the next one.